ask yourself this question: would I want to date me today? If not, why not? That'll point you right to what you need to work on. Thanks so much for joining us again on Second Act TV. So happy to welcome back Robert Manni, the author of The Guys Guide to Love and host of Guys Radio and TV. Thanks for being here again, Robert.
Thanks for having me, Silka. I always enjoy myself when we're together.
Me too. and we have another conversation right up our guy alley here. 5 reasons you haven't found love yet. This is advice for women. We want the man's perspective again. And there was an interesting article I came across written by a woman. And there's a few things I'd really like your input on. One of the first things here that they point out is that it's really not about putting yourself out there more or signing up for all these, dating apps, but it's really about being ready for a relationship, being ready to receive love. And are you doing something to actually push love away? Are you pushing men away? So it's a good premise. And she has 5 points here that let's go over those. The first one: you're too needy. That there's no faster way to repel a man than to need him. Does being too needy send men running?
Well, I think there's a two-edged sword there. Men want to be needed, and a lot of men thrive on that. But I don't think you want to get to the point where it's needy. They want to be helpful. They want to help fill in the gaps for you, and they're there for you. They've got your back, but they don't want to feel that they're not independent enough to be able to handle themselves without the guy. That puts a lot of pressure on a guy, and guys have enough pressure in a lot of different ways, as do women. So the feeling of neediness is it's a little bit, it's like almost like a weakness. And when it gets to that point, again, wanting is good, needing is a little bit much. And so there's a slippery slope there and a fine line you walk. So I think women need to be careful about not coming across as too needy. They want to feel that, oh yeah, the guy's there for me, he can help me. And they want the guy to feel that way too, but they don't want the guy to feel that all the pressure's on him and they're so needy, I can't do anything without you, it's a bit much.
Well, you took it exactly where I was going to follow up, because the first thing that struck me here is that on almost every other segment we do, on this channel, is about what men want. Is you got to make your man feel like you need them. And then the first point here is, don't be too needy. Where is that fine line? But I think you made a really great point that yes, you want there to be a purpose for this man in your life, or that he can help you with stuff, but don't depend on him for your happiness. I think that's maybe one of the key things here.
And every guy is different. Some guys love to be the one that kind of fills that role, that the woman's kind of quote unquote needy and he does all the stuff that she wants. And other guys are more independent. They're like, they want a partnership and they don't want to feel that, they're at different levels, if you will. And I'm that kind of guy where I want it to be a partnership and want to be there, but I don't want to be everything's on me. And I don't want it to be everything's on the woman either. So I think you have to find what works for you, and everybody's different. This is not a one size fits all concept. Love in general is not that way. It's every little relationship is a separate universe. So we have to be aware of that.
Really, the takeaway is like, if you were unhappy before the relationship, you're going to be unhappy in a relationship. It really is you have to be okay with yourself and not need somebody else to fulfill you. So maybe that's where not really a fine line, but really where the definitive line is. So think about that. Are you too needy? If you're still looking, you haven't been successful, is that something that you're doing? The other thing here, you're too picky. That most women are usually at one extreme or the other, she says, desperate and willing to put up with anything, or too picky and unwilling to settle for anything. Now, I don't know if that's all women, that's a little much. I think, some of us are in the middle. But it's a good point that we have been so saturated with what a relationship should look like that we forgot what love actually is, or what it really is.
Well, I think we need to be selective, and particularly people over 50. By then, you kind of know what you want and what you don't want. The flip side of that is you don't want that. I have found sometimes through my own interviews on my show that sometimes the people who are single the longest, their checklist is the longest also. And that's an issue. I think you have to break things down into the must-haves. The deal breakers have to be values oriented. When you get into like a lot of physical qualities, and he has to have long fingers or something like that, you get into or X amount of money in the bank. I know money's financially stable is one thing. Having a set amount of money is another thing. Having a vehicle that they drive around and they feel good about, that's one thing. Having to have a Maserati, that's another thing. But then that's the world we live in. So
Yeah.
you have to decide what's really important to you. Now, if you're over 50 and you're single and you've never been, if you wanted to be and you've never been married, you need to ask yourself some questions as to what am I doing that maybe I need to take a second look at. That's part of it, I think. So you can be picky and you can be selective and you can be discriminating, but don't have it work to your disadvantage.
Yeah, it's well, and the reminder here is, if two women, and we talk about this a lot too, is a lot of women, if the spark isn't there on the first date, if they're just the fireworks aren't going off, then it's not the right guy. And we've talked about that ad nauseum, that that is really, you need to give guys more of a chance, and that goes for guys too. If they think that way about the woman, that the first date sparks are highly overrated. The attitude that comes from that, or that has come out of that, is that it's better to be alone than to settle. And the point they make here is that, is that really better? Is it better to be alone than to settle? I guess it means what settling means to you.
Well, it has to be what fits with who you are. I mean, if settling means lowering yourself and lowering your standards, that's not a good thing. But being with yourself doesn't necessarily have to mean being alone. If you're comfortable with yourself, listen, the only person you're going to be with all the time is yourself. So you better get comfortable with yourself, and that'll make it easier to get comfortable with other people, and also to have that filter to determine this person's right for me. This person may not be right for me. I agree with you completely about we're in a swipe left, swipe right
Mm-hmm.
world now when it comes to dating, and too much ghosting, too much deleting, too much disappearing, and we don't give people a second chance. And the first date might not be fantastic, but you might find that you get to know the person. Hey, listen, at the very least, you could make a new friend who might have a friend that ends up being the one that's right for you.
Yeah, you brought up the checklist, and I think that closes out this point really well. Is really look at what your priorities are, what are your qualifications, your non-negotiable qualities, and are they realistic, or are they superficial? And maybe that's what's keeping you. So, good point. Good point. Number three here, you haven't worked on yourself. We talk about this so much, that before we get out there again, especially at this day and age, or at 50, over 50, you've got to have resolved some of your past in order to put yourself out there again, and actually be able to create a healthy relationship. And that like attracts like, that if whatever state of mind you are, you're likely going to attract that.
I think out of the 3 points we've talked about, this is by far the most important. Too many people dive into, particularly when it's online dating, the online dating pool or the dating pool. They go out there and then they try to figure it out along the way. People neglect to do, men and women, is that when they'll repeat their mistakes over and over again, and they rarely are circumspect about it and say, what am I doing wrong? What can I do differently? Maybe I'm not doing anything wrong, but what can I do differently? If you take the time up front, it's like, they have an exhibition season in baseball before they go to the major league games for a reason, to get some practice in, to know what the team has to work on. It's the same with ourselves. We have to really look at ourselves, but too few people do that. Most people and guys, they know what they want and this is how it is, and they're not open to new ideas. And women can be like that also. And They
Yeah.
don't take the time to say, they'll spend more time criticizing the other,
Yeah.
their past partners than they do saying, well, how did I
How did
contribute
I
to this
contribute?
situation? Now, I'm not saying if somebody was being abusive that you're supposed to say, oh, it was my fault. Of course not. But you have to say, well, how can I avoid getting into that type of situation, that type
Sure.
of relationship again?
Again.
And I
Mhm.
think then you could start to be able to read the tea leaves a little easier.
No, I agree. And it is, the whole, what does it mean to work on yourself? There's a good suggestion here, a question. I love this. How do you know what you have to work on? They said here, ask yourself this question. Would I want to date me today? What a great question. Would
That is
I want to
fabulous.
date me today? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And that'll point you right to what you need to work on. If
I
you're
think
honest with
that's
yourself. Yeah.
totally 100% agreement.
Number 4 here, you want guys who don't want you. I think maybe that's a defense I don't know.
I think that's dysfunctional. If you're attracted to somebody who doesn't want you, I mean, why would you want to go out with somebody who's not interested in you? I mean, they could be, it's forbidden fruit or like the one I can't get. And there's something to that. But when you're over 50, like get a hold of yourself. You have to grow up and say, okay, who am I? What's realistic for me? Without lowering your standards. And what
Mhm.
do I have to offer? And put out the
Mhm.
best version of yourself. Do the things that you like to do. And don't, don't, don't chase after guys. If they're not treating you well and they're not interested in you, don't lower yourself, just move on. There's a lot of other people, as we talked about. 50% of people over 50 are single. That's a big pool of fish out there. All
Right.
right, move on.
This is, I really, and I don't want to harp on this, we'll move on, but we've actually done a whole segment on it. Are you attracted to people who aren't attracted to you? And why is that? And that is something to really think about if you find
Mm-hmm.
yourself getting into in falling into that rut, so to speak. Yeah, it's just a waste of time and energy, and you just have to be honest with yourself. A good question, as they say here too, is that what are you really getting out of this relationship that's making you
Nothing.
miserable? Nothing.
Exactly. You're hurting
What,
yourself.
yeah, what is the what are you getting out of it? Yet it is something that happens every day.
If you don't love yourself, then that could happen. But if you really love yourself in a good way, I'm not talking about narcissism, but
Right.
love and appreciation of yourself as being, divine spark or whatever, you're not going to want to be with somebody who doesn't respect that in you or is not interested in you. If somebody's not interested in me, I've always been like, okay,
Okay.
I was attracted to them. I realize they have no interest in me whatsoever. I see what I can do about that. But at a certain point, you have to say, okay, maybe this wasn't in the cards and I
Right.
have to move on to look elsewhere. And it
Yeah.
usually works out right
Yeah.
for everybody. If you keep moving, if you're going to dwell on being fixated on somebody who's not interested in you or doesn't treat you right, I mean, you're asking for heartache.
Exactly. Exactly. People, I think they fall into like wanting to prove that they're right. And anyway, that's a
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole other discussion. Finally, here I like this faulty filter system. That our filter system, based on how we make choices, it's based on our interests, our desires, and fears. If you are, for example, afraid of rejection, then you're likely to pick up on stuff like when you're presented with different opportunities, you're focused on getting rejected, or what you'll notice is when you're rejected, like 100 people can want you or make you feel good or give you compliments, but the one the one time when you're either rejected or hear something negative, that's what you're going to focus on. That's what they're calling a faulty filter system. And I think that's a really good point.
To me, when you're doing the filter, it's like sales qualification. It's a
Mm-hmm.
necessary process, and you do that with dating also. Now, dating's supposed to be a fun sport, but you also have to do some qualification. So to me, if you stick to the basics, is this person, do I feel good when I'm around them? Do they make me feel good about myself when I'm around them? Are they honest?
Mm-hmm.
Do I trust them? Are they fun? I mean, what are their values? Are they in
Mm-hmm.
line with my values?
Yeah.
Those are 5 or 6, a half dozen right there. If you get check marks on all of those, you're in the right place. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
physical attraction, the chemistry, that's all different and that's all
Mm-hmm.
individual. You never know what's going to happen there. But
Mm-hmm.
I would keep it simple in terms of your filter system, your
Yeah.
qualification system should be based on value based.
Mhm.
And the other stuff is more extraneous, and it's less controllable also.
Yeah. Yeah. Like on a whole other level, the way I could just immediately identify with this, especially when I first started this channel. I mean, we get hundreds, thousands of comments, and the majority of them are great, or they're
Yeah.
engaging, or, and then you get though that one, like a really bad, and that's what, wow, how could that, you focus on, and I mean, I'm past all that, but that was a great way to realize what hey, there's something wrong here. Forget this. You focus on the good, not the bad.
Exactly. And particularly like in our culture, so everything's like you're this or you're that, you're this or you're
Mm-hmm.
that. And then if anybody's like in between or offering a new
Mm-hmm.
perspective, that's
Yeah.
like that's odd. That people have a
Mm-hmm.
hard time even processing that because they want to put you in a box. You're that or you're this. And when you don't fit those boxes, that makes people sometimes uncomfortable. They don't like new information if it's not in line with what they've convinced themselves is the truth.
Well, and I guess the bottom line here is just, appreciate and acknowledge the good in people versus focusing on the negative, and then, attracting it, which is certainly
Mm-hmm.
keeping you, if that's what you're doing, from finding love.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming to the end again, a subject we can, gosh, talk about forever. I think what I want to say is, what all of it sort of comes down to is the past, that we need to understand how, especially at our age, over 50, how much of the past we allow to affect our present and our future.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to know why. What are the unhealed wounds? What is still affecting us? That may be what is all comes down to for not finding love. I'll
Mm-hmm.
let you finish, Robert.
No, absolutely. And I think the key thing, at least the epiphany for me, because I had been in a lot of relationships that I thought were good to a point. They didn't work out long term, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't say they were failures if there was part of life's experience. But I asked myself, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? And I had the feeling that came through me, the knowing that like I need to make room in my heart for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a very simple thing. And I don't mean to mean corny or anything, but you know what? Ask yourself that sometime
Yeah,
and see what the answer is. And it'll give you a good idea as to are you ready for a relationship or
I like that. I like that a lot. Thanks, Robert. Well,
not.
as always, I will link to all of your information, to your podcast, to your YouTube channel. You are now all over the world on UK Health Radio. We have the link
Right.
in the show notes
Thank
below.
you.
And of course, your book. Pick it up. Hey, summer is just around the corner. Great read. And I look forward to our next conversation on Second Act TV.
Thank you, Silka. Thanks, everybody.